Hi, everybody. In this video, I would like to go over some of the main claims and arguments of Alvin Plantinga's The Reformed Objection to Natural Theology. Let me share the screen here. There we go. Now, the term natural theology refers to a program of inquiry into the existence and attributes of God without referring or appealing to any divine revelation. In this paper, Plantinga will be presenting the position of particular Reformed or Calvinist theologians that argue that the existence of God is necessary for believers to be sufficiently grounded in their belief. On page 49, Plantinga quotes 19th century Dutch theologian Herman Bavinck, who says about belief in God, "We are so deeply convinced because of the indelible impressions which experience of the beauty of the world makes upon our consciousness that we need no arguments or demonstration." He then says that the certainty of the existence of God is established only by faith. Plantinga says that Bavinck holds two things. First, that arguments are not the source of the believer's confidence in God. And second, the believer does not need arguments for a rational justification in God. Plantinga then gives three further points that Bavinck makes. In his opinion, first, that we cannot come to knowledge of God on the basis of arguments, meaning that the arguments for the existence of God just don't work, and so it wouldn't help to know God even if they were true. Second, that the Christian believer should begin with belief in God rather than have belief in God be the conclusion of some argument. Third, belief in God resembles belief in such basic things as the existence of oneself, or the belief that there are other minds in the world. And since we don't need arguments to believe those things, we don't need arguments to believe in the existence of God either. Plantinga's next point is that John Calvin claimed that God has created us to have an inclination towards belief in him. This tendency or inclination is partly covered up by the existence of sin in the world. If it were not for sin, human beings would believe in God to the same degree that we believe in the existence of other persons, the external world, or the past. Even though this disposition to believe in God is partially suppressed, it is nevertheless universally present. Once anyone opens their eyes to the whole workmanship of the universe, according to Calvin, one can't help but see that God exists. In the section on foundationalism on page 53, Plantinga begins to clarify the Calvinist objections to natural theology. He begins this part of his project by arguing that what the reformers mean to say is that belief in God is properly basic. In other words, a person is entirely within their epistemic rights to believe in God, even without any explicit arguments to do so. The term epistemic is from the Greek word for knowledge and means something like grounds for knowledge. So to say that someone is in their epistemic rights to believe something is to say that one can claim to have knowledge of that thing if one has that belief. The idea of being properly basic means that one need have no other grounds for that belief in order for that belief to undergird much of one's belief structure. This more precise way of talking about what the reformers have in mind leads Plantinga to explain the position of foundationalism. Foundationalism is a position in epistemology, the study of knowledge, that says that in order to have knowledge, one must have a groundwork of basic beliefs that are not justified by other beliefs, but which themselves justify the rest of the beliefs that one holds. From the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, epistemic foundationalism is a view about the proper structure of one's knowledge or justified beliefs. Some beliefs are known or justifiably believed only because some other beliefs are known or justifiably believed. For example, you can know that you have heart disease only if you know some other claims, such as your doctor's report, such as that your doctors report this and doctors are reliable. The support these beliefs provide for your belief that you have heart disease illustrates that your first belief is epistemically dependent on these other two beliefs. So, for instance, Descartes was a foundationalist because he thought that the belief I exist is something that is so clear and distinct, it can't be false. And so it becomes a basic belief that itself can ground the rest of one's beliefs. Now, even though he will make a distinction between two kinds in a moment, Plantinga's point is that the Calvinists were rejecting what we've been talking about, this kind of foundationalism that Plantinga calls classic foundationalism. Plantinga argues that foundationalism is a normative view. A normative statement says how the world should be, not just how the world is. A descriptive statement is one that just describes the world rather than how the world should be. So the statement, for instance, John and Fred are arguing, is a descriptive statement because it just describes something about the world without indicating any standard of rightness or wrongness. This isn't just moral rightness or wrongness. Mathematical statements are normative because there's a right and wrong. There's a right answer and a wrong answer. There's a kind of a standard that is followed to determine correct and incorrect. So John and Fred are arguing is a descriptive statement, whereas the statement John and Fred should not be arguing, or it is stupid for John and Fred to argue, are normative statements because they imply a standard of right and wrong. Plantinga is saying in this part of the text, see page 53, that foundationalism is a normative view. In other words, one should base one's beliefs on properly basic beliefs that are self-evident or logically true. In short, one is a foundationalist if one thinks there is a right way and a wrong way to have a belief. Plantinga says foundationalism implies that people have responsibilities, duties, and obligations with respect to what they believe and with respect to their other actions. So in order to be rational, one must reason properly, according to the foundationalist. Plantinga next argues that we can better understand this idea of foundationalism as a normative thesis if we introduce the concept of a noetic structure. A noetic structure is the set of propositions a person believes that are held together by relationships between those beliefs and other beliefs that one holds. He gives an example of someone who believes two propositions, say I believe two propositions, proposition A, some proposition, and proposition B. So I believe proposition A and B. Suppose that I believe two propositions, A and B, such that I can only believe those two propositions because I believe each one of them separately. In other words, I believe A on the basis of B and B on the basis of A. So many of our beliefs are connected in this way. It might seem trivial, but the connections are there if you think about them. Say you believe that this weekend would be a good time to wash your car. This belief is based on other beliefs that you hold, such as there is such a thing called a weekend, that washing your car is something that you can do, and that washing your car would be a good thing to do, and other beliefs that exist that are related and support your belief that this weekend would be a good time to wash your car. Some of your beliefs are accepted in a way that don't depend on other beliefs. These are what the foundationalist calls basic. Plantinga argues that the belief that I am seated in my chair or that I have a pain in my leg are not beliefs that I believe on the basis of any other propositions, and so they are basic. So if one were to spell out one's full noetic structure, one would include first a specification of which beliefs are basic and which are non-basic. Second, a full account of one's noetic structure would include the index of degree of belief for each belief. That is, some beliefs are held more firmly than others. For instance, I believe that 2 + 1 is 3 more firmly than I do that there is a 35% chance of rain today. So I have a higher index, a higher degree of belief that 2 and 1 is 3 than I do that there's a 35% chance of rain today. The third thing that would be included in a full account of my noetic structure, for instance, would be an index of the depth of ingression. Now, what he means here is that some of my beliefs have lots of other beliefs depending on them, so that giving them up would threaten many other things that I believe. While there are other beliefs that I can give up without changing many or maybe even any of my other beliefs. For instance, let's say I believe that a Lexus is more expensive than a Honda Accord. But if I found out this was wrong, it wouldn't change many of my other beliefs. However, if I were to discover that there really is no such thing as a Lexus or a Honda Accord, this would have a big effect on many of my other beliefs. Similarly, Plantinga says that if we were to come to think there hadn't been much of a past or that there weren't any other persons, for instance, these beliefs would have a great depth of ingression to our noetic structure. Plantinga next makes a distinction between weak foundationalism and strong foundationalism. A weak foundationalism is one who thinks that there are basic and non-basic beliefs, and non-basic beliefs should be justified in terms of the basic beliefs that support them, but there are no strict rules for what constitutes a basic belief. A strong foundationalist accepts weak foundationalism, but adds some conditions for what Plantinga calls proper basicality. For instance, to be properly basic, a strong foundationalist might argue that a proper proposition needs to be either self-evident or evident to the senses. It is a strong or classical foundationalism like this that the Reform thinkers mean to reject, according to Plantinga. In section 3 on page 57, Plantinga underscores two contentions of Reformed epistemology. The first is that a Christian ought not to believe in God on the basis of other propositions, and the second is that one can know that God exists even if he has no argument. Finally, Plantinga responds to an objection that under his view, people are free to believe whatever they want, including that there is a great pumpkin who returns every Halloween. Can't that belief be taken as basic just as easily as belief in God can be taken as basic? Plantinga responds to this by saying that even though one does not need to test their basic beliefs against what the classical foundationalist holds, there still is a way to arrive at one's basic beliefs. One can take a belief as basic if one chooses an example of a statement that appears true and then tests it to see if it is consistent with other beliefs one has. And if the belief is reliably consistent, it can be properly basic for them. I should say that this part of the paper, the end here, Plantinga may be saying more than what I say that he's saying in response to this great pumpkin objection. He may be saying less, but to the best I can make out, this is his view. So I apologize if anyone watches this and and would argue against, and I welcome comments for opposing views of how I presented Plantinga here and in the rest of the video. I hope this video has helped you understand this very interesting reading. So I thank you very much. And take care.